President Doyle reconvening the Oregon Board of Pharmacy meeting today on December 15th, 2023. Almost at 24, getting ahead of myself. We left off the last just before break with package E9, that's Echo 9, and also recognizing immediate past executive director Joseph Schnabel. Now we are going to move backwards to package Echo 8, pharmacist applicability. And I yield the floor to staff members Melvin and Davis.
Staff Member Davis, this is discussion E8. Today is the board's, I hate to say this, 8th review of OAR 855-115-0001. Today, the board will consider sending the proposed rules to January 2024 rulemaking hearing and potentially adopt in February to be effective with the new licensing rules on 3/1/2024 at 12 a.m. There's just one rule that we're going to discuss. I'm going to give some history. That's all the history there, but I'm going to give you this. Okay. So we're Paren 1 and 2 have not been like further discussed. They've been through rulemaking a lot of times and we haven't received public comment. It's really about Paren 3, and that's what I'm going to focus our discussion on today. So we need to request further board discussion of 3 in this rule. To facilitate the discussion, I'd like to provide the board with a reminder of the progression of this rule since the June 2023 board meeting. I'm kind of doing two things at once here. The board discussed at the June 2023 board meeting if counseling should remain an exception in this rule, and the majority were in favor of leaving counseling in the rule, and so that was what we did, and we sent it to July rulemaking hearing. I went to July, and I have the language there for everyone in the mailing. Then at the August board meeting, the board discussed the July rulemaking version of the rule after receiving public comment, and the board provided direction that they intended for central fill and remote processing locations to be included in this exception in 3 for out-of-state pharmacists at registered drug outlets to be permitted to practice on Oregon patients without being licensed in Oregon. The board and staff drafted revisions in real time to address the central fill and remote processing direction that the board provided during the meeting. So then we sent it to September rulemaking hearing. Then at the October board meeting, the board discussed Paren 3 based upon public comment received during September rulemaking comment period and reviewed the staff proposed modifications to Paren 3. However, the language sent to rulemaking appears to have only resolved the issue for central fill pharmacies and is still problematic for remote processing locations based on the comments that we've now received during the November rulemaking comment period. So we're here today to discuss yet another set of proposed options to revise the language in OAR 855-019-0100 and then move it over into OAR 855-115-0001. It's important for you to be aware that failure of the board to adopt a rule prior to 3/1/2024 would remove this exemption that you really want to have in rule and would default it back to the statute. So like the fact that pharmacists who are in another state who are working for an out-of-state registered drug outlet and are performing counseling don't have to register with us. They're permitted to because of this rule. If we don't have a rule in place, then they would then default back to the statute and under statutory authority should be registered with us. So we've proposed 2 options for you to consider today. You of course can consider other options, but we thought these were probably the most. Sorry, it's doing weird. It's like loading strangely. Okay, so we gave you 2 options. One is just adopt the language that is in the current rule in 855-019-0100. That language has been in use since June of 2010. It's 13 years on the books. Haven't had a particular problem with it. We were discussing whether you wanted to remove counseling from it in June and then have had all these extra renditions that spurred from that conversation. So to go back to just the original language, Or one other option that we wanted just to show you and be able to have discussion is 855-019-0100 with what we think are some smaller edits. So the phrase located in another state who was working for an out-of-state registered drug outlet pharmacy was language that was used in August, September, and November rulemaking filings. This language was crafted to clarify that the rule only applies when the pharmacist is one, outside of the state of Oregon, and two, working for versus in due to telework. So we use the word for instead of in because they're physically, a lot of people are not in a location anymore, but they are working for a drug outlet pharmacy. And then three, it only applies when that out-of-state pharmacy is registered with us, with our board. And so those were some clarifications that have gone through all the rulemaking. I don't think they've been a point of contention. And so we wanted to give them as an option for just updating the rule. The board also needs to decide if you want the last sentence. Board staff have proposed it to clarify that a pharmacist working separate from a drug outlet and providing other pharmacy services like cognitive services, maybe MTM or prescribing, must be licensed in the state and are not eligible for the exemption from licensure in 3. But the rule already says that, like you have to be working in a drug outlet for this exemption to apply, or working for a drug outlet for the exemption to apply. So it's really just there for clarity. But again, adding any language or doing anything at this point, we're kind of at a crossroads. We're last opportunity to send this through rulemaking. So with that, I'm going to give it back to President Doyle for discussion of the 2 options we proposed. You're welcome to propose something different. I just caution you that we have tried to do some real-time edits and have run into issues, and we do feel that these are sound options. So there you go.
Member Doyle, thank you, Staff Member Davis, for the introduction. So the question at hand is, do we wish to keep current rule as printed beginning on line 62, or use that rule with edits beginning on 70, or if there are any additional edits that you'd like? First, begin the round asking if you'd like to keep the current or the newly revised. Board Member DeBarmore.
Okay. Remember DeBarmore. Really, I appreciate the edit. Located in another state working for a registered drug outlet. Very good clarification because work or remote work depends on how the state classifies it. A huge question, and so this helps to clarify that it would allow pharmacists to follow that state's rules, and that we would not have issue with that. The question that I have, and I'm sorry, I don't want to open a can of worms, but it is the question that I have. A registered drug outlet. So we said, and our intent was, wanted to make sure we were not excluding, for instance, a remote processing. And that potentially could be a location that doesn't have drugs. Be someone in a group of people in another state working in right now, a licensed drugless pharmacy and non-resident drugless pharmacy. So I would assume we would still issue them a drug outlet registration because they're non-resident. That's the only license they can get is as a non-resident pharmacy, quote unquote pharmacy, because they don't have drugs. They're processing, and I feel that that's how we've handled it up to this point, correct?
Yes.
Sure.
Staff member Efremov. Currently, yes, drugless consulting registration exists until it's possibly repealed. So I understand the point that you were making here related to potentially outlets who do remote processing on behalf of, say, another registered outlet, but then themselves do not have drugs on site and are not doing the actual act of the physical dispensing, but they are part of potentially the preparation if we're looking at statutory definition of dispensing as preparation and delivery, the acts that are part of that, they could potentially be part of the dispensing process, but not have drugs on site. Thus, how would they be registered for it to be only permitted from a registered location?
Yes, kind of. Yes, they don't have drugs. They don't have drugs, so therefore they we just are now said we are sending a repeal of our drugless pharmacy license. And if you were out of state and you didn't have drugs, it would be a drugless pharmacy license.
Stefan Breitbart, yes, the point you are making is valid and I think not contemplated from my recollection of the discussions. And I think part of what staff was working on was the direction from the board. If that pharmacist is exempt from licensure, at least you know that they're still the registered outlet so that the patients in Oregon are receiving the standard of care from those locations and they have to follow the rules to have safe practice pharmacy occurring on Oregonians. So in this situation, I'm not quite sure how the board would like to discuss handling this. But I understand the point that is made. There is a fatal flaw. Perhaps,
Yes,
for sure.
okay. So
Acknowledged.
is there an offer to, what would
That's
what
correct.
would it take just to have a non-resident license? A non-resident
Right.
license. Call it what it is, a non-resident license. Instead of having this, you have a state license and you have 47,000 pages.
Dr. Breitbart, I think, the question at hand, statutorily, we have the authority to register drug outlets. We have broad authority in 689-205 to write rules for governing the practice. So there could be a possibility, I hear the question maybe being asked if it is the will of the board to look further into the possibilities of different registration structures for an outlet type that would not necessarily be a drug outlet because they might not have drugs at their location, or to assess just a standard out of state or non-resident, whatever the terminology we're using at the time, registration for all.
Right, exactly. Yes, because we are creating a gap. We are unintentionally creating a gap in ability to have a license if you don't have drugs. But we said very clearly, we want to make sure that those particular groups of people practicing on behalf of our Oregon pharmacies can maintain their work without drugs on site. So we have a hole in the dam, we need to put our finger in. But again, I 3B. Need to figure out how to fix the licensing situation. And we need to make sure that if they are doing the work associated with a drug outlet, and it is all these things apply. Otherwise, they are independently practicing and they need to be licensed in Oregon. Long-winded, sorry, but identifies that gap.
Table this. Work on it. Staff Member Davis, recommendation from board staff would be to table this discussion. That is an excellent point that board member DeBarmore has brought up. We don't want to make changes in real time. We'd like to take time during whatever our next break is to kind of huddle on this and come back to you. So if we could move on to the definitions package and proceed with the agenda, and then we will revisit this. Is that okay with you, President Doyle?
Board Member Doyle, Board Member DeBarnwell was the one person who had the opportunity to comment now. Is there any other board member that wishes to provide comments before we would table this and bring it back shortly? Can those comments wait until seeing no comments, then we'll table the conversation on Echo 8 and move on to E11, Echo 11.
Explain that we haven't, a mailing that no one has seen yet.
Staff Member Davis, based on decisions made earlier in the board meeting today, we have made modifications to this mailing to be consistent with other decisions made by the board. So I'll go over those as we go through the rule. Otherwise, this package had not changed since you had looked at it at the last board meeting. But now we've just either left language as it is currently or modified the language consistent with the other rules that have been adopted. So I'll go through those.
Okay. Highlighted in green.
Oh, and we've highlighted in green the things that we have changed since the mailing so that you can see what has changed. OAR 855-006-0005 related definitions. The change in paren 8 was proposed at the last board meeting and the board discussed that. We have not made any further changes. Paren 9, we were going to propose the language that's now struck that was highlighted in yellow. Now paren 9 reads exactly as it already is in 855-006-0005, so with no changes. Paren 10, the same thing. We had shown you what was proposed to change. Now we've just reverted it back to the language highlighted of number 10 in green that's currently in the rule. Paren 11, we do not believe we are going to get to the conversation of compounding, nor do I think that you will have time, even if we did, to get all the way to the end and motion to send it to rulemaking. So we've done the same thing, just remove the proposed changed language and just put back in the current language that is in rule concerning compounding. Paren 14 is the language that you saw earlier today in 855-115-0005. This would be adopting it into Division 6, so it'll apply across all of the divisions. It's the same language that went through rulemaking in that mailing for counseling. No change since the October board meeting either. This is a big thing. Scroll down. DUR, same thing. It went through the package in Division 115 during November rulemaking, and same language, no changes since October. Intern has already been adopted by the board back in August, and so we're just adding this definition because we have definitions for all the other licensee types in 6, just not an intern. Removal of oral counseling in paren what used to be 34 and paren 35, the participation in drug selection and DUR. You have the updated definitions that I just showed you a minute ago for counseling and DUR that would replace both of these. Pharmacy technician, this is the same language we showed you at the October board meeting and was discussed. Responsibility for advising when necessary or when regulated of therapeutic values, content, hazards, and use of drugs or devices. Previously, paren 49, we've adopted a new definition for counseling. This is also a definition for counseling. We have lots of definitions for counseling right now, so we're going to have one single unified definition. Paren 50, we showed striking this language at the last board meeting. No changes. 54, we showed this at the last board meeting related to tamper-resistant prescriptions. This is just a move from 855-006-0010. We're going to show it next. Just moving it. Yeah, it sits in its own 0015 additional definitions. Currently, it sits in its own place. And then proposing to strike electronic transmitted prescription. There's no need for that definition. striking tamper resistant out of that separate rule. Back to you, Board President Doyle, for board discussion.
Member Doyle, thank you for that walkthrough. Asking for board member input if there are any paragraphs, for example, para 1 or para 2, etc., that would like to be discussed. A paragraph in the whole document. Seeing and hearing none, I will therefore make a motion. I, board member Doyle, move to send proposed rules OAR 855-006-0005 and OAR 855-006-0015 to the January 24th, 2024 rulemaking hearing.
As revised. Sorry, we revised them.
As revised.
Member Shaver, yes. Member DeBarmore, yes. Member Hall, yes. Member Hemmons, yes.
Joyce, yes.
Clerk Patil, yes.
Board member Peppermint, yes.
Motion unanimously carries.
Staff member Davis, we're just checking the agenda to make sure that we've gotten everything done except for the pen that we put in the previous discussion for the next break. Are we good? We've got all the rules. Okay. So now we're ready to move in the agenda to the next item. We will come back and reopen that rule discussion later after a break.
Oh, yeah, we are.
I believe we're at mailing F related to the petition request.
Member Doyle, we will now review and discuss the petition request filed by OSPA, which is also known as mailing F as in Foxtrot. Staff member Davis or staff member Development was listed as myself to be the leader on this. So as in package F, you have the situation, background, assessment, and recommendation from previous meetings. We had gone through a public comment period that has been received. And now we're at the juxtaposition where we have the opportunity to either move to making rulemaking proceedings to amend the specific line in question in OAR 855-115-0150. That is the word diagnose, or we have the opportunity to deny the petition. And I will I'll begin a conversation with regards to the recommendations of each board member for how they view this petition. We begin with board member Joyce.
Board member Joyce, at this time, I agree with the recommendation.
Recommendation.
That is to initiate rulemaking proceedings.
Correct.
Member Hall.
Board Member Hall I'm saying whether I agree with the petition to amend section, right?
Yes, if, correct me if I'm mistaken with regard to the next step, staff members, but, if we would, agree to the petition, then our next step would be move to initiate rule proceedings where that word would potentially be, stricken from the rule.
I agree.
Board member Doyle, the pharmacists, do not have the authority to diagnose. Many of the, some of the concerns that were issued were, confusion and even questioning, the formulary committee, actions and whether or not there would be, confusion between diagnose and how those are operationalized. My experience on the board has led to very, vigorous discussions with regards to, not including, pathways in the formulary committee or yeah, I'll just leave it at that. And there have been, treatment pathways that we have not, agreed to because it, broached the level of, potentially having to make a diagnosis, upon site, a presentation factor. Pharmacists are involved in many different types of care for patients and, but those are always pursuant to the diagnosis. We treat anticoagulation disorders, but we do not make the diagnosis, of the anticoagulation disorder itself. So the presence of the word was originally meant for clarity. We have never been able to diagnose, and I believe the adjudication, practices, if there was a complaint of a pharmacist, making a diagnosis, that it was out of the scope, then potentially it would come to the board, and whether the word diagnose is or is not in the rule, I believe that we would adjudicate it as a non-standard of practice or potentially professional conduct. My recommendation is to, keep it in rule. And again, that is for the clarity, for providing for our pharmacist providers. Board member Chin.
Member Chin, I appreciated reading a lot of the comments, but I think that there might be some interpretation maybe of the difference between diagnosis and symptom management. And when there were a lot of comments about I treat common cold symptoms, I treat sore throat symptoms, I treat heartburn symptoms. We're talking about not diagnosing, we're talking about symptom management. That is the scope and expertise of a pharmacist. I agree with board member Doyle about diagnosis isn't in the history of pharmacy practice in the state of Oregon thus far. And that all of the collaborative drug therapy and the other CPA, is still going to get the insurance rate. The formulary advisory committee names are pursuant to a provider in a diagnosis and then that provider using the pharmacist's expertise about treating all of those. There's a tremendous amount of expertise and knowledge that is helpful to all Oregonians to the safe treatment and prevention and disease. And those, all of that practice is necessary for all of our patients. to say that pharmacists are trained to diagnose when it's kind of, I've asked, remember Doyle and asked about. Listen, yes, there are doctors of pharmacy, but they're different. It's not minimizing the excellence and education that pharmacists have. It's just a different excellence in education that they have to help the people who do make those diagnoses. So I would be opposed to removing it.
Remember Patel?
Board Member Patel. I was very clear on my this board meeting. Number one, we never discussed this prohibited practice diagnosis under the prohibited practice by pharmacist. Number two, I'm not saying that put into the rule, but how about it's just the silent rule? Just don't keep in the prohibited practice pharmacist. I understand, we have different expertise and we are doctor of pharmacy. But think about the example of the strep throat. So if I'm going to someone taste for the strep throat, and if they're positive, then I'm going to diagnose like, hey, you have strep throat. I'm going to give you this antibiotic, penicillin, or now if I can't diagnose, because every diagnosis they have to when you prescribe medication, you have to have the diagnosis. Every diagnosis, not certainly you have to have medication. You can even use the non-pharmacological option too. So with that regard, I'm a pharmacist. I'm going to say, yes, you're positive for strep throat. Now go to your primary care provider, urgent care, get the diagnosis, get the prescription, and then I'm going to dispense the medication. That does not make any sense to me. So strike down from the prohibited practice. And if we are not doing something for 20 years or 50 years or 100 years, that doesn't mean we cannot start doing it. We are not doing administrating immunization for 20 or 30 years, but now the pharmacist that's the profession, they are administering immunization the most. So strike down from that prohibited practice. Thank you.
Member Beeman?
Board Member Beeman, I'm in favor of sending it back into rulemaking or to reevaluate this and to consider striking it from the language.
Member Hemmings?
Further minutes, 3 minutes. My understanding is that the statute doesn't actually say that a pharmacist cannot diagnose. It's silent. And if it's not there, then you're not allowed to do it. That's the assumption. Correct? It's not in statute. Therefore, it's not something that you can do, therefore you can't do it. Is that correct?
There's Board Member Doyle, there seems to be perhaps some disagreement on that, different advocacy, but my personal opinion is, yes, I agree with your statement.
Who determines that then? If the statute does not, it's a legislative issue, but if the statute does not say that you can do something, who determines that you can? Does it have to be in statute or in order for you to be able to do it?
Board Member Doyle?
Not always, okay. So it's not in statute. And we're adding it as a rule. And it's new, right? This edition is new. How old is the Board of Pharmacy in the state of Oregon?
They're the oldest boards in the state.
Why is this needed now when you haven't needed it before?
This is board member Chin, because the scope of practice of pharmacy has changed dramatically since pharmacy board started and the statutes were written. And when the statutes were written, pharmacists weren't doing this kind of care. It did not have doctors of pharmacy for the most part. It would have expanded scope of practice that other legislative sessions have granted the profession.
She's taking from my 3 minutes.
Take my time first. You asked the
I know. Okay, so pharmacist right now doesn't diagnose because it's not in statute, correct, right? Have we seen cases where, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say this, but I mean, I'm just trying to understand why do we need to add it there now when you have been practicing for decades and it hasn't been an issue? Why do we now need to add that language there? That's what I'm trying to understand. What's changed? I mean, I understand the scope and all of that, but it still doesn't change the fact that as a pharmacist, you haven't been diagnosing based on what the definition of diagnosis is, because it's not in statute. So why are we needing to add it in rule? What they say, legislator,
this would
put out
be.
my time.
If I could, this is board member Chin, if I may, just as an example, going back to what board member Patel said, right now, strep is not on the formulary advisory committee's scope of being able to diagnose or treat. So currently, if a pharmacist isn't able to do a CLIA wave strep test, diagnose somebody with strep, so it's currently not in their practice to diagnose and treat strep. From what I, unless we've changed our formulary advisory committee things, that's not in the scope of practice of the pharmacist. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't be. But as the rule is currently written, or as the practice. And I'm gonna leave it at that. Right now, diagnosing strep is not in the formulary advisory committee's list of things that pharmacists do.
I yield back to President Board.
Board member Vickerman,
Board member Viverman, I get that we haven't had this in a rule. It's a point of clarification. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, because they've been doing it for a long time, but as it was mentioned, things have changed. I don't think that I am comfortable with, I don't think I'm comfortable with taking it out. I like it in. I like it for clarity. I'm a rule follower. And right, none of you are,
What are we clarifying?
be done.
that they cannot diagnose. If it's not in there, then they can't. Not saying they can, not saying they can.
Board member DeBarmore,
Board member DeBarmore, in reading through what was provided, and the analysis by the, legal counsel, I was intrigued by, one particular section that indicated if the diagnosis is not included in, or sorry, if the definition is not included in our particular section of the statute, we can't use definition from another section. And so we have to go to the dictionary and use a definition of diagnosis. And that would be to identify by symptoms or distinguishing characters. Or aesthetics. a pharmacist does all the time, identifies by symptoms. That's where I think some of these concerns are, is we don't have a definition. Don't have anything within our section that says yes or no, and there's no definition, there's nothing that points us back to the medical statute. That intrigued me. It was a legal interpretation. That's what we asked him to do, right? Is that in fact true? If the definition is not within our group of statutes, we can't use that definition. So for me, we haven't had it. It's understood. I don't know, it's created a significant amount of chaos. It doesn't seem necessary at this moment in time. I think it's something we could potentially revisit in the future, and understand better, or have a clearer definition of diagnose, or, but it's not, we can't utilize that definition of diagnose if I'm following this legal interpretation.
I don't have a big skin in this game, so to speak, in terms of whether it's there or not. But I understand all of the things that you're saying. I think I agree with you that I think that as pharmacy scope continues to change, that we need to be working with legislative bodies about how to make words here.
And maybe
This isn't it.
maybe that's where we look towards in the future, is making the needs to be cleaned up. It's bold. Thank you. Really mustn't hear me.
I'll go around the table again. If you have any, short comments, Member Joyce?
Former Joyce, diagnosis opens you up to liability. I mean, I have concerns with putting it in rural. Then we have our protocols, and some of those are borderline diagnosis. And some of them in our protocols, like for example, the fluconazole doesn't require, I mean, doesn't just, it's symptom, it's based on symptoms, right? We're not making any diagnosis there. I mean, those protocols are fine, but when you go into diagnosing, I'm concerned the liability it puts the pharmacist in if we start putting it in rural.
Member Hall, any additional comments or questions?
Member Hall, I feel the same way. I agree with board member DeMar said, and I just worry that it's going to deter pharmacists to help patients in rural areas, even with like OTC suggestions and things like that.
Board Member Doyle, I don't have any additional comments. Member Chin, any additional?
Additional comments, but it's fine with me if I would go with the majority of the board.
Board Member Patel?
Board Member Patel, quick comment, the strap through things has come from statutes that taste to treat. So it's in the statute, that's what we can do, the strap throat test. Is that not in the protocol, feedback or anything, but it's statutory.
Member Beeman?
Member Meeman, I'm in favor of still reevaluating this. I think that any confusion around around this and any, like I said earlier, with changing things for clarity doesn't mean that it creates a better situation for patients. And I think this is an example of how patients essentially are being or will be, I guess, affected. And security is great, but safety is and access is really obviously our focus, but access is going to be a huge focus for us in Oregon as time and pharmacy moves forward in the near future. So yeah, just don't want to restrict that access for sure.
Member Hemmons?
Board Member Hammond, I'm still trying to understand the why this was needed, why it was needed to be added. I don't get that. So it's hard for me to say. I just don't get, I haven't heard what the rationale was, did something happen? Why we needed to add this. So
Board Member Doyle, we're not allowed to comment on compliance cases, so, we can't provide feedback from that. But we as a board are trying to help our licensee understand their, practice requirements, practice regulations, and, I believe it is my understanding the intent of having prohibited practices, diagnosis being one of them, helps provide clarity for our licensees to know fully what types of activities, for example, they should not engage.
this is Board Member Hammond again. As someone who does diagnose, the definition that Board Member, the Barmore is addressing is interesting, but I don't know.
Member Whitman, any additional comments? Member DeBarro?
Nothing more to
So I will call the question. The floor is open for any board member to make a motion in this matter.
Board Member Hemmons, is there only two options here? One
Board
is to
member,
send it to rulemaking and one is to do what?
denies the request and we move, then the rule stays intact.
Okay, thank you.
Staff Member Davis, just for clarification, it's to initiate rulemaking, not to send to rulemaking. We don't have anything to send to rulemaking today. The board will be giving us direction to initiate rulemaking.
I, Board Member Beeman, move to initiate rulemaking on OAR 855115015 para 3 to remove the word diagnose.
Member DeBarmore, second. Member Hall, yes.
Board Member Hemmons, yes.
Member Joyce, yes.
Member Patel, yes.
Board Member Bipperman opposed.
Member Chin abstained.
Member Doyle opposed. Motion carries with Board Member Doyle and Bipperman opposed and Board Member Chin abstained. Thank you. We'll now move to mailing G as in golf. If staff could please provide direction to guests.
Free.
Yep. I apologize.
Rob, yes, right next to Jamal. You can use that microphone.
All right, good afternoon. This is Bree and staff member Seth Vermont here. I apologize. So for this presentation, this is mailing G. And this is going to be the SBAR request we're going to review. And we have, I guess I'll let Rob, if you don't mind introducing yourself to the board.
Bob Geddes, and I am the Director of Pharmacy Legislative and Regulatory Affairs here on behalf of Albertsons Companies.
So I will start off and just provide the board some background information and hand off to Rob to give a little of an update, and then we'll open it up for board discussion. All right. So currently at this time, we have a request in front of the board from Albert Central Fill Pharmacy for alternative verification process. So Albertsons Companies is the parent company of Safeway. It's requesting approval to utilize an alternative pharmacist verification process in its Albertsons Central Fill Pharmacy Vancouver facility located in Ridgefield, Washington. The site is currently licensed in Oregon and is an out-of-state pharmacy with a central fill designation. The central fill facility supports commonly owned pharmacies in the state of Oregon. The process that will be employed by the central fill facility is for a pharmacist to verify the contents of the automation canister each time it is filled and prior to the canister being loaded into the fulfillment automation. The verification performed by the pharmacist serves as the final verification check for any prescriptions that are subsequently filled from that container. Another pharmacist does not check the prescription vial once it has been filled and labeled. There are routine quality assurance checks of sampling of the prescription vials filled during the life of the canister. These processes serve as secondary safety and accuracy checks. So to orient the board, there are three similar requests that have been made and approvals provided on processes like this. The most recent for the board's review was in August of 2017. Fred Myers / PPS had requested a similar request here for pharmacist alternative verification using technology that they currently employed in other states. The board reviewed that request and had concerns about the implications of the technology, I apologize, including the lack of clear rules, no specific regulations found in states that were using this process, responsibility for errors. They stated it was unclear who bears the responsibility if errors do occur related to that technology. Patient interactions, they had concerns about how the process would impact pharmacist-patient interaction. Circumventing existing rules, some board members at the time believed that the proposal went against the final check rule for prescriptions and job displacement. So at that time, they had instructed staff to gather more information and to provide that back for the board to have a full review of that request. Please scroll down a little more. So that was then brought back to the October 2017 board meeting. And at that time, the board did approve the alternative verification request for that location only, directed staff to facilitate the licensure designation for that specific situation, and requested all future similar requests be presented to the board for approval. That's why you are seeing this today. It's from previous board direction. Also, the reason the information is collated and presented in the format that it is this is what was requested from the board before. So the same questions that were reviewed for the approval for the Albertsons, I apologize, the Fred Myers PBS request are the same questions that Albertsons has provided to the board today. And with that, I might just, if you could just scroll down. The assessment of the information for the board to review is just the questions and the two attachments. And if you don't mind pulling up the first policy, I'm going to hand it over to Rob for just a quick update for the board related to, could you read the title of it for me,
Yes,
Rachel? I
let me read
apologize for those that are on the phone also to be able to see.
The right
I
page break.
apologize, teams, after lunch break.
I blended it all together, remember? Was it the first one? Is it after this?
Okay, so it's not an attachment.
Yeah, let me see. Hold on. Okay. This is the revised item that we need to look at?
Yes, please.
This, okay. Let me share it with the public. Hold on just a second.
Thank you. Just for the public, we are pulling up the individual policy so that it's easier for everyone to see simultaneously.
This is the amended version, correct?
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Rob. Don't mind. Thank you.
Yes, okay, so thank you very much. So we did, in preparation for this meeting, submitted our standard operating procedure to the board staff for review and to help collate the information for the board. And then we received from staff member Efremov a couple of follow-up questions. And in one of those questions that we went back in researching it, discovered that we had misunderstood the capability of a setting in the Nexia software. And so needed to make a couple of updates to the SOP related to the quality assurance measures that we're able to do based on the software capabilities. So the first one, and this is really actually key to the question that the staff member Efremov asked, it's in the section A2 processes. So originally we had in that it's titled dispensers, that we had a sentence that you may have read as you reviewed this in preparation for the meeting that said canisters remain attached to the dispenser until they're completely empty, at which time they are replaced with another canister of the same size. And so the question that was asked of us was, what happens, which pharmacist is responsible if more than one canister is used to fulfill a prescription? So our previous understanding of the QA measures that we thought were possible, the first and the last prescription in a canister would be verified by a pharmacist, and that pharmacist would be responsible. When we went back to answer this question to get confirmation to make sure we were understanding that correctly, that first and last isn't actually a capability. It's a certain percentage of the prescriptions that are fulfilled out of a canister that would be reviewed for quality assurance. And so in order to make sure that there wasn't a question of which pharmacist is responsible in the instance of two canisters being used, there's a different setting that allows you to not run dry. So if the canister does not have sufficient medication to fill a prescription, it will not count the prescription until there's a canister that's been loaded that has enough, thus eliminating the use of two canisters to fulfill one prescription. So we're removing that one sentence just to be clear, so that we don't have that question of who is responsible. And then if I can have you scroll down, I think it's on page 4 of this document, the routine audits and quality assurance. This is section G1. So as we get down to this one, this is cleaning up this section just to make it align with what capabilities the software does have to allow for these routine quality assurance audits. So we had previously had the second bullet point in this previously. Let's see here, product verification. Yes, under product verification, we had an additional bullet that would have, we were planning on doing the 10 first fills and last 5 fills out of a canister. When we discovered that was a misunderstanding in the capability, we did remove that. So that leaves us with the more of a routine randomized audits of the prescription. So through the life of the canister, as they go, essentially 2 fills out of every 100 would be routinely audited by a pharmacist using virtual verification to ensure that the right medication did end up in the bottle as intended. So this gives us a little bit more visibility, and actually not just the top and the bottom of the canister, but we can see a random audit throughout the entire fulfillment of that canister. So that's kind of the changes. And then in the first bullet point on the screen today, we are able to do the 10 first fills of a dispenser. Just to quickly explain that, the canister holds the medication, the dispenser is what does the actual counting. They are paired with each other. And so the dispenser itself is associated with a specific NDC or manufacturer of a medication. And so when we associate a new NDC with the dispenser and calibrate it and so forth, we can audit those first 10 fills out of it to make sure that it's counting as expected, and so forth. We had previously included in there the last 5 fills as well, but that we learned that the last 5 fills is not something that can be predicted. And so we did have to remove that from that sentence. The last thing that I'll just say is these are routine audits or quality assurance. They are not a replacement for our upstream processes that we have built to make sure that technicians are scanning the bottles appropriately and filling the canisters appropriately, and then having pharmacists do a verification of that prior to it being loaded in the machine. The purpose of these is just to catch if there's ever a breakdown in that process so that we can make sure and get ahead of that and prevent those from going to patients. So we appreciate the board taking this up for consideration, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to stand for those.
For your presentation, Mr. Geddes. So open up the board for conversation, any comments, or questions with regards to the S-bar, and, particularly if you have any other, questions for the, Albertsons representative. We will begin with, Board Member Hall.
Member Hall, I don't have any questions at this time.
Myself, I don't have any questions. Board Member Doyle, that is, and, Board Member Chin,
Member Chin has some questions.
Board Member Patel.
Remember, but maybe I didn't read or maybe I missed, but just the curiosity, how many tablets or pills that each canister hold?
So thank you, Board Member Patel. So Rob Geddes speaking again. There's two different sizes, and there's a 2 liter and a 4 liter, but it's going to be dependent on the size of the tablet. So it's hard to estimate exactly how much one could be, but just to give you an idea, 2 liters and 4 liters. So the larger tablets would likely be, or the higher volume movers would likely be using that higher capacity canister versus the lower capacity one.
Further question.
Member Beeman,
Member Beeman, no question.
Member Emmons,
Robert Henry, just a clarification for myself. This was from 2017.
I don't understand the question.
Member
Go
Beeman,
ahead.
if I may, no, the last time we saw a request, this board member Beeman, last time we saw a request like this was in 2017. So that reference here is just giving the history of what we saw when we saw a similar request come through. And based on that request and the board at that time, we had, I can say we, because I was on the board then, had requested to see future innovations like this come before us, because it was quite novel at that time. So that's where the 2017 stuff comes in. So this is a new request for a similar type of technology as we had a previous request for in 2017.
Thank you, Board Member Hennon. So we denied the request back in 2017.
No, we didn't.
Oh,
Remember Beeman again, no, we approved it, and if you look at in your SBAR document, the B, there are 3 total similar approvals currently.
thank you.
Member Vipperman,
Board Member Pepperman, I think that all the questions I would have had are very well documented. My only comment is that I wonder about the quality assurance. Is there times when the count is off? And what's the rate of that?
So this is a new technology. We don't have any data in our facility at this point. But there are, in addition to making sure that the correct tablets are in the bottle, there are routine count audits that occur. So it would be routed for a technician to count to verify that it matches what was expected in the bottle. And if there's ever a discrepancy, then a pharmacist is involved to that point.
And it's 2 every canister, is that what
That's a different, that can be set up with a different configuration. I believe it's actually more related to the dispenser. We usually look at that when a new dispenser has been loaded with a different medication in it. So you calibrate it for the size of the tablet, and so you want to do some count auditing initially to make sure that the correct counts are coming out of the machine as expected.
Right, thank you so much for your.
Member DeBarnwell,
Board Member DeBarnwell, I don't.
Member Joyce,
Former Joyce, I do appreciate the use of technology to make all our lives easier. Having been in institutional pharmacies worked in that setting for quite a long time. BD Logistics, Baker Cells, it's all great technology. The use of video capture, the use of QR codes and barcodes. I approve it all, or I like it all. My question is, for example, in an inpatient setting, we have IV rooms, and we comply to USP 797 or what have you, USP standards. What regulating or what are your minimum standards as far as safety? Is there a regulation? Is there a federal standardization of this type of technology? Who does it? Like for the
Thank you, Board Member Joyce. There is not, to my knowledge, a standardized regulating body that would regulate the technology itself. It would be, in our opinion, subject to the laws of the state. So in this case, since we're shipping into Oregon, that's one of the reasons we brought it to the Oregon board to make sure that we could get it approved. The other two states that this facility is licensed in and going to be serving stores are Washington, where it's currently located, of course, and then Idaho, and neither of those states have a regulation that would be in opposition of the use of the technology. So that's kind of the way that we've approached this, is just reviewing the regulations in the state where the patients are going to be located to ensure that this would be acceptable use. And if there's a question, bringing it to the board for their question and approval. The board of the pharmacy itself is still subject to any safety, OSHA, all of the regulations that would pertain to employee safety and so forth. This particular facility, there's USP 800, of course, it's related to hazardous drugs and so forth, but we aren't using any hazardous drugs in the automation itself, nor are we using any controlled substances. So some of those rules wouldn't apply with the use of this particular technology.
So is there a facility or a protocol to maintain cleanliness? I know it's a non-sterile environment, obviously, but do you guys have some kind of a protocol for cleaning the machine?
Yes, there's routine maintenance
Standards.
Yeah, in fact, with the amount of automation that's in that location, there's actually a designated employee that is just responsible for purely maintaining the equipment, making sure that it's clean and in good operation.
But regulating agency checks those, checks that, or has oversight on that, us or Washington State or?
I don't believe that I'm knowledgeable on that. I don't know if there's any, if.
I want to make sure that, it's a clean environment.
Yeah, Staff Member Efremov, so obviously they're registered with you as an outlet, so you have authority over regulations and their operations pertaining to rules. We don't do physical inspections at locations that are not physically located in our state. So I would say the most likely body who would be overlooking the physical operation on inspections would be Washington.
Agreed, and Washington does do routine basically on a schedule, so it's not just at the need of being inspected, but they do come on a regular basis unannounced. So similar to Oregon's process for performing routine inspections on site.
Okay, yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm a big fan of technology, and we use it in hospital settings with BD logistics. And when errors do happen, they happen when they're put into the canisters, put into the system. You can barcode a medication and put it in the wrong canister and so forth. So, I mean, mistakes can happen, but I mean, I definitely support, I like what I've seen. Thank you.
Concludes the board's comment and question period, so I will call the question. I, Board Member Doyle, move to approve the request for Albertsons Companies Incorporated as presented.
Seconds.
Member Beaman, yes.
Member DeVarner, yes. Member Hall, yes.
Board Member Henry, yes.
Member Joyce, yes.
Member Fatil, yes.
Member Bibberman, yes.
Motion unanimously passes. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your consideration.
Yeah. Board President Doyle, just for a point of question two for board members, for future requests that come of this nature, were you going to entertain a discussion about that, or do you want to table that for another time? I just thought it could be an opportunity if the board wanted to direct staff to take similar requests as this and put them in a format like a staff delegated authority, since the board has pretty consistently given staff kind of the hallmarks of what would be an approval process for similar requests like this, and simultaneously look at adding innovation like this or consideration for innovation like this within the Division 41 revision. Just trying to not put barriers on the timing. If, say, an operation would like to start, we have to wait till it can come to the next board meeting, which could delay that process by a month or two or more, depending on board meeting agendas and how many things the board has to look at. So just for your point of consideration of time and efficiency.
Thank you, Staff Member Effernoff, for that request. We will answer the first of the 2 bullet point questions on there. Please answer with a yes or no, and if there's any additional feedback that you'd like to provide. My answer, as I'm next up to be first, I will answer yes to the first bullet point question. That being, does the board want to direct staff to present future similar requests? And, oh, sorry, I'm going that backwards. Does the board want to direct staff to present future similar requests and or add to future staff delegation delegated authority assessment discussions? I'm interested in having that be staff delegated authority.
Member Chin would like that to be staff delegated authority.
Member Patel?
Remember Patel. I think I'll be fine with that staff delegated authority.
Member Beeman?
Member Beeman, I would be okay with staff delegated authority, although my preference lies in bullet point 2 to have it be considered part of, or at least a subset for rules.
Member Hemmons?
I choose the second one. Or no? But no, I'm confused. I don't understand the first one.
Staff Member Effernoff, can you please provide some detail?
Yes, I apologize. This is Staff Member Effermoff. I think in trying to think full circle about these processes, since rules will take some time and usually take a few years to get into effect, staff was hoping to create an additional line item on the staff delegated authority that the board would review and edit and approve as necessary to permit the approval of these processes until we can get rules into place in Division 41, but then the staff delegated authority would no longer be needed.
Remember Hemmons? Someone explain that to me in language. I don't understand that. What?
Remember Doyle, we have provisions that we review on an annual basis for what we as the board consider that board staff can do by themselves because they have had the direction of the board. We've been reviewing in this situation, this case at hand. We also have the history of 3 other cases that had been proven. In my opinion, we created a track record that staff understand the direction of the board, having approved all 4 of the SBARs over the last approximately 6 years. And so when a future request like the one that we've just reviewed, then the staff know how the board wants to handle it, and we're giving them the authority, the autonomy to be able to manage that situation without having the SBAR come to us again in the future and spending more time on it that would potentially produce also a yes or an approval of the SBAR request.
Board Member Hemmons, thank you for that clarification, because this is my first one. I would like to have the opportunity to prove whatever the opposite of that is.
Okay,
I
thank
don't know
you.
what that is.
Board review each time.
Like this, so I don't know what that is.
Board Member Vipperman,
Board Member Bipperman, I sat on the board through all three of these. And I think that is an absolute perfect example of how I view things that go through the board, like we want to see how they go. And yes, they're going, and yes, they're going. When we first did this, we didn't even have a clue at what a kiosk was or a locker, and we do not require that for this. I think it would be perfectly okay to delegate that to the staff. If they have a problem with it, they're gonna bring it to the board anyway. So I think it's perfectly okay to delegate that to the staff.
Over to Barmore.
Board Member DeBarmore, I agree, until there can be some ideally relatively simple language, added into, rule. My question would be, in the meantime, how would a stakeholder know that it is an alternative to bring a suggestion of this nature to board staff for evaluation? There is reputation at this time that would not necessarily be assessed.
This is staff member
People are there is reputation at this time that it's not, that not to bring ideas forward unless there's rules.
Staff member Effermoff, I guess for the record, I feel like I can dispel that myth. If there's things that people have questions, they bring it to staff, however format, then we bring those to the ED as appropriate to then process with board president to then decide what the right channel of how things are to flow. So if there's questions, I would always encourage people to reach out. And then we could handle them. Obviously, everything depends. I can't say blanket statement, right? How everything gets handled, how the inquiry is raised, will vary how it's handled depending on what that question is. But if there is, I guess for the, what is the strange term, but we're still using it, the alternative verification process of like this format, if someone is requesting this to happen at their facility, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to continue processing.
Thank you. We've taken away waiver language. I think there used to be a form that could be used to put forth innovative ideas for, I have one. I think Fiona had them and your minor days. Where you could submit ideas that you wanted to implement. Those aren't available anymore. So I was just asking for, innovative, different ideas that we don't have clear rules for. How would somebody know that they can bring forth those ideas and present them as Rob did today? Because that is great. It's perfect. Yeah. Please do.
Jose, staff member Effermoff, does Executive Director Fox want to add anything on related to further communications, or is this something, I don't know if there's anything additional you wanted to add?
You don't have to add anything, or just note that.
Really know it.
Remember Joyce?
Board Member Joyce, I would prefer a request review. I would like, as that's what we're getting at. Especially where there's something innovative, like to see it.
Member Hall?
Not at all. I'm fine with that delegated authority.
Member Beeman?
There being a clarifying question. So when we say staff delegated authority, we are intending that as this type of technology, not all future technologies, correct?
Staff member Effermoff, for clarification, it would be this exact type of request, the alternative verification request, to be added as a draft line item for the board to review at a future revision of the staff delegated authority with the hallmarks outlined that have been presented consistently for the board to review if you choose to approve. Just try not to do extra work if the board is not interested in going that direction.
So just for clarification for board member Joyce, it would not be for any new advances. It would just be for this type of since we've seen 3 and now 4. New innovations come through, we will still see those before implemented if there's not rules around them. Thank you.
So Board Member Joyce, so that would like be a certain threshold or of new technology, basically, like that. What would, exceed staff delegated authority? I mean. This is a kind of a renewal. Okay, gotcha.
Something.
Like a drone or robot or something.
Right.
Yes. I'd like to see.
There are robot nurses.
Yes,
There will be robot nurses.
Ask the board members again, if they'd like to speak, please raise their hand or can also speak into the microphone. So we had, so board member Joyce, are you okay with staff delegated authority?
Board Member Joyce, yes, with that clarification.
So there's board consensus for using staff delegated authority just as a phraseology here, so that we can move on to the second question. And that is consideration for the assessment or revision of Division 41. Comments on that with Board Member Chin,
I agree with that.
Board Member Patel,
Yes, I agree with that.
Board Member Beeman,
Yes, board member meeting, yes.
Board Member Hemmings,
Member Hemmings, what is the current practice right now? How is this currently being handled?
Staff Member Effermall.
So staff member Efferma, it's been through this process, so bringing forth requests to the board for your review from each request related to this alternative verification process only. So again, just for clarity, just talking about this isolated type of request, not all requests. So staff was just trying to ensure the direction from the board could be to include this type of concept as we start to fulfill the possible new strategic plan as the board finalizes that in incorporating this in the innovation component.
Member Hemmings, so if we're not changing it, why is it a question? This is what we currently do now. Why do we have it as a question?
Board Member Doyle, we just had agreed that there would be staff delegated authority.
Well, I didn't agree to that. but That's
We
fine. Okay.
consensus.
All right.
And so now additionally, we'd be giving directions to board staff to be incorporating technology like this into rules when Division 41 is being updated.
Got it. No.
Board Member DeBarnwell,
Board Member DeBarnwell.
Board Member Joyce, yes. Board Member Hall,
Board Member Hall, yes.
Member Doyle, yes, also. So there's consensus in answering the second question.
You did
Yeah.
that.
I apologize. I see that I mismarked my line
Okay, that's
item.
okay. Hopefully you marked it yes, because I am absolutely in agreement.
Thank you for speaking up, Board Member Zimmerman. We have staff. Alvin,
Thank you, President Doyle. For the motion for this, if you could please add as presented today.
They already motioned.
Did you say as
Doing
presented
something
today?
else.
Sorry, I missed it. Thank you. Never mind. Strike.
So Staff Member Davis, we went to President Doyle to determine the order that you want to go in. It is 2:30. We do need how long of a break? 15-minute break to discuss what was raised earlier about the applicability rule. And that would put us at 2:45-ish, leaving an hour and a half on the agenda for other discussions.
Board Member Doyle, I believe taking care of that rule, rewriting, if you will, or editing is the most important thing. And so we're gonna take a break now for 15 minutes and adjourn at 2:45. Adjourn now and resume at 2:45 to continue with business. Thank you.